On this Sega Talk, we discuss the short-lived Sega World project. We discuss the different locations and attractions and why it never panned out. So grab your ticket as we enter Sega Talk World.
SegaBits presents Sega Talk, a podcast talking all things Sega, with your hosts, George and Barry.
Look, it's a giant talking egg. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the master here. So what?
Hello and welcome to episode number 136 of Sega Talk. I'm Barry. With me is my theme park patron, George.
Hi, everyone.
What do you think about that? Like, there's this whole... I get hit a ton on social media, like, with targeted videos of, like, theme park adults. It's become, like, a whole culture.
See, I get hit with the, like, it's not worth going to Disneyland videos where, like, a person comes in and they tell you how expensive it is. It's almost like they're trying to drive me away and they're trying to lure you in.
Yeah.
So it's like an opposite effect right here.
I get ones where, like, all right, here's some tips to get into the park. It's like, oh my God, it sounds... I've been to Disney. It was a lot of fun, but it's work. Like,
it is. It's like...
The scheduling and the planning and the apps, it's like...
I think that people that like to, like, go for fun, a little bit, they like misery. They like the standing in lines.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you like standing in lines?
Well, I... Actually, if it's, like, the right line... It's a lot of fun, like good themed lines. I remember the Star Wars ride was fun, Little Mermaid was fun, but on this episode, if you can't tell from that little pre-discussion there, we are going to be talking about Sega World. And before we get into that, I have to mention that this episode was a Patreon pick from Patreon picker Nicholas Schaefer. And I'm very happy that we finally got around to doing his. I let him know a few weeks ago that he was going to be bumped because we had the Sonic movie, which was, we kind of had to cover that because I was kind of a part of that whole, like, uncovering of the Sonic movie treatment from 1994. And this episode, it kind of feels like it kind of goes hand in hand with that just because it's that same era when Sega was really trying to branch out and expand and define themselves as an entertainment company. And as we'll learn later on in the episode, we're going to be seeing stuff that would have been happening around the same time that the Sonic movie was being developed. So it's interesting to see what different parts of Sega were doing at the time. Nicholas, typically, since he's the picker, would have his memories read at the top of the show, though it looks like he does not have any.
Oh. I'm pretty sure I know he loves the theme parks. He wished they would extend it to his area of the woods, right? Is that the...
Yeah.
Okay.
Possibly. I'm peeking here at our chat, seeing if he said anything. But no, it looks like he didn't. But that's okay, because we do have a couple memories that we will share at the end of the show. George, do you want to tell the people a little bit about this Patreon that I was talking about?
Yeah, let's keep it short. So if you go to patreon.com/SegaBits, you could support this show and everything we do. As little as $1. There's different tiers, so you guys check them out. Tell us what you like, what you want. Maybe even request something that you want as a tier. That would be nice to see. And check us out. And
we'll see you there. So, and like Sega World, if we don't meet our funding goals, we're gonna have to close the theme park. So, I'm just kidding.
In line.
Yeah. So Sega World. What is Sega World? Well, before I did the notes for this episode, I honestly only really knew about Sega World Sydney, and I remember seeing the name used on various arcades, and so it always was kind of a mystery to me, something that I could have looked into, but I guess I never did. I didn't really feel like reading a couple wiki entries or digging up articles. And I'm glad that Nicholas picked this because I learned a lot, and I'm hoping you will too. So Sega World was a name that was commonly used for Sega amusement centers around the world. So internationally, the name was used for a number of venues that acted as both amusement game centers and amusement parks. And you might be saying, well, what's the difference? An amusement game center is kind of like a Dave & Buster's. You know, you go in, there's all these games, but there's more. There's like food, there's shopping, there's prizes. But an amusement park, of course, that's like a little bit more. So that's rides, themed characters coming out, themed areas. You feel like you're in more than just like a large space with video games sitting around. And so at their peak success during the 90s, Sega was also very successful as a home console manufacturer. So you can imagine like 94, 95, around the time when the Sonic movie was being developed. This is when Sega was also at their peak with the Genesis, and they were really trying to get this Sega World concept to become what they envisioned it to be. At the time, Sega's aspiration was actually to become one of the largest entertainment companies on the planet to rival Disney, and opened hundreds of Sega Worlds over the next decade. That was seen as a key to laying the groundwork to that Disney rival that they wanted to become. Well, it was short-lived. Sega World did provide an infrastructure for larger business endeavors and can be considered successful, as Sega built amusement theme parks since then that are still thriving. However, many Sega Worlds have since permanently closed, and any remaining have been rebranded under the new naming schemes by Sega. And since then, and we'll talk about it soon, Sega exited the arcade business, or at least running arcades. And so anything that was a Sega World that was rebranded to Club Sega are now, Gigo.
Right.
Cool. Gigo. George, were you ever aware of Sega World as a kid, and did you ever visit one? I'm guessing no.
No, I was not aware of it. And I'm assuming this is not a U.S. thing or anywhere near the U.S.
Yeah, you are correct.
Okay.
We'll get in. I could never find the why, but we'll get into some of the alternatives the U.S. did have. Did you ever visit a Sega-owned arcade?
I guess technically I did, but I didn't really feel the GameWorks. Mm-hmm. When it was under Sega management, I guess, or under Sega, whatever. But it didn't really feel like one when you went in there. It just felt like a Dave & Buster's. Like if I went to Dave & Buster's, I felt like even in Dave & Buster's, you'd find more Sega arcade games sometimes. Because I think the one here in Fresno, where in California near me, they have like Scarlet Dawn and stuff, and I don't think I've ever seen a newer arcade machine like that. Usually. Yeah,
if you were an American, to actually go to a Sega World, you would have had to have been traveling internationally. It would, if it was one of the English-speaking ones, like in the UK or Sydney, it would be in a very small window of time, like a 3-year span. If you were abroad, it would have been a little bit of different experience. So the definition of a Sega World really depends, like I'm saying, on the region you're in. So typically a Sega World contains coin-operated arcade machines, but a large majority also targeted families and contained colorful decor, frequently featuring Sonic the Hedgehog as the character mascot. So it's not unlike seeing Mickey Mouse at a Disneyland, which kind of explains, the mindset Sega was in. They're like, we've got Sonic, he's a hit. He could easily be the mascot for a entertainment complex. And he eventually was for a brief 3-year time. So some Sega World locations, like Sega World Hekijima Carnival House, operated mid-sized attractions. So think like double deluxe arcade machines that take up a sizable space. You'll see some of those on Sega Retro. Often they're pre-existing games that, like, if it was a racer, they built it out into 2 full cars that would kind of move as you played with them. Others were like attractions that you could only find there. A recent one that kind of comes to mind is the that Sonic running game that was in arcades where you ran on a treadmill.
Wow. I didn't know that.
And yeah, that was a couple years ago. I think it uses the assets from the Olympics games, but it's just Sonic. So, sometimes you'd find games that were very limited run just because they were specifically for these venues. But there were some Sega Worlds that operated as indoor theme parks and acted as overseas versions of Sega Joyopolis. And if you don't know what Joyopolis is, I actually have one of my few props on hand, a Joyopolis guide here. And this was, I think, given to me by Patrick from the website. I could be wrong, or Aki, one of them sent it to me. And you can see here, it gives you an idea of the layout, like it's multiple floors, lots of attractions, Sonic Carnival, which is kind of interesting because it seems like the name Carnival pops up a lot in the Sega worlds you'll see. So, yeah, I guess the modern equivalent would be Joyopolis. And so, yeah, let's see. Oh, yes. So the two notable large locations were Sega World London and Sega World Sydney. So, as we'll soon notice, there are no Sega World USA locations. And since, like I said, I don't really know the why, do you want to speculate maybe why that was?
We just didn't deserve it. Maybe regulations. I want to say regulations on arcade machines or something like that we had here. Maybe some sort of like gambling aspect to some of the games they had. I've only seen some pictures of some of the Joyopolis and Sega World stuff, and like some of the stuff was pretty crazy. Like I remember specifically the Initial D having a real car that you get to like, and then they move the car and it like runs the wheels for real, like the engine's actually on. That's crazy. So
yeah,
I don't know if you could do that in America. I've never been to a place where they let you do that. So I wonder why. Do you know why?
I don't know why. It really feels like America, like Sega World New York and Sega World LA and Sega World Chicago, like those all seem like very viable things that should have happened, but they didn't. And I'm kind of surprised, especially like a Sega World Chicago, because Sega amusements were based out of Chicago. So, even though games were being developed in California and Japan, they were being manufactured in Chicago. So how cool would it be to have a Sega World Chicago? You don't really have to ship them all that far. You can test games there. It seems like a no-brainer.
I guess the only other thing I could say is that we're so much bigger here in America. So like the foot traffic, but again, like you said, a big city like Chicago, I feel like it's totally different. Or like LA, even it would be like a place to go. It's like Disneyland. It's like we have them in America, right? We have all the other theme parks in America.
Right. So it is kind of surprising they didn't do that. But it is worth noting that elements of Sega World were adapted to use in other projects, including GameWorks centers in America, like you mentioned. We could cover GameWorks on another episode of Sega Talk. I think we probably will someday. There's a few episodes I think I'm kind of pitching in this episode. Because it's worth noting that Sega was a partial owner in GameWorks during their inception in 1996. And I think I brought up GameWorks not too long ago on the show, but do you, like a little bit of trivia, do you know where the name derives from? Like GameWorks?
No, I don't.
DreamWorks.
Oh.
So it was the same
classic Shrek animation company.
Yeah, so DreamWorks was a joint project from Steven Spielberg, Jeffrey Katzenberg, and David Geffen, which is why you'll see DreamWorks SKG like on their logo. And they did work with Sega and some other companies on the GameWorks project. And some concepts that did leak out not too long ago, they're on Sega Bits, where remember like Virtua Fighter statues would be in them?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like maybe that was a project that was in the works, so they didn't want to compete with themselves. And as is my Sega Talk catchphrase, as we'll soon learn, we'll see why that probably happened. It's also worth noting that in 1998, the Walt Disney Company created Disney Quest, which acted as their own GameWorks or Sega World concept. So it's interesting that, around maybe 1989, this GameWorks concept started to gain traction. Sega was saying they wanted to compete with Disney, and then 10 years later, Disney's actually competing with them in terms of like Disney Quest versus GameWorks versus Sega World Sydney. And my other little bit of merch that I was going to show off is I love this thing. I got it at Goodwill for like $5.
Oh.
It's Mickey Mouse as a Disney Quest employee. So he's like in an arcade employee uniform.
So that's what he's been doing.
So he's got and it's cool. They called them navigators because it was like you were on a journey. So not staff, but navigator. And it's just, I love this. This is one of my favorite like non-Sega or Sonic like video game related merch. Like it's just so funny to have like arcade employee Mickey like, hey, how you doing? Let's go play some Outrun 2, But yeah, and this actually I think came from the Disney Quest Chicago location, which was quite short-lived. I visited Chicago a few times, and even I don't remember it being around at that time, so it must have like come and gone. But little fun fact, if you go downtown to the street where the Disney Quest was, they had themed manhole covers in front, and one of them's still there, I think. It has like Mickey Mouse's face on it, so check that out next time you're in downtown Chicago. And so following up from that, you've been to a GameWorks?
Yeah,
you just said,
right.
How would a GameWorks kind of compare to your typical arcade? Does it feel different?
I mean, it's like a Dave & Buster's to me. That's what I saw. Like you get food. I think I remember correctly, food for sure. But it was just an arcade, And the games were fine. But you know what I hate about the new age arcade machines? I guess.
What?
They're all like ticket machines. They're like not really arcade games anymore. Like you see a few, but it's like almost 90%.
They're redemption machines,
right? Like you even like I think they had like a Mario Kart and even had tickets on there when you did something. I think, and it's like, is that all people play for now?
It's interesting, yeah, because I went to a Dave & Buster's, I think late last year, and I was happy to play games that didn't give me tickets, yet they were giving me tickets. And I'm like, I'm good. I'll play for longer. You don't need to cut the game short and say I won 10 tickets. Like,
yeah,
let me keep playing based on my skill. Don't like cut me off because I won tickets and I'm done.
Right.
But yeah, I've been to. Mm-hmm.
Go on. You were going to say you've been to.
Yeah, I've been to maybe 2 or 3 GameWorks during the Sega era and post-Sega era. The only thing you really notice after Sega pulled out was that the Sonic branding would like disappear from some of the merch. Like they had GameWorks shot glasses with Sonic's face on them. I actually have some down in my little drawer or my little display down there, but yeah, you're right. Like it just was kind of like a Dave & Buster's. It was like a very large arcade with food, ticket redemption, prizes, and in some locations, bowling, laser tag, like things like that. So in terms of how GameWorks compares to like Sega World Sydney, there's no comparison. Like Sega World Sydney was much bigger and grander. I think a more valid comparison would be Disney Quest. I recommend anyone to go on to the YouTube channels like Yesterworld or Defunct Land. They do great retrospectives of those. And I went to Disney Quest Florida once, and I don't remember much, but I remember it being like an experience. You show up, you get into this elevator, there's new animation and recordings of the genie from Aladdin welcoming you. And then, like, the elevator is like
with
what's that?
With Williams' voice.
Yeah. Well, he was still alive.
Oh, okay. I was going to say.
Yeah, and it was just kind of surreal because it was like all it felt very like Disney in the sense that like they really put a lot of effort into the theming and moving through the arcade. You got inside and there was like just all these lights and sounds and like big things to look at. There were a lot of Sega Arcade games there actually, but then there were also like stuff that was specific to Disney Quest. So like I think there was a like one where you would design a roller coaster and then you'd go in VR and ride it, or you'd go in like a pod and ride it. There was one where you would race cars, but miniature cameras were on the real cars, and it was kind of like that new Mario thing that came out not too long ago where you race real Mario Kart cars in your house.
Oh.
So yeah, I would say Sega World Sydney and Sega World London were probably a lot like Disney Quest in terms of just like theming, focusing more on games that are like, you know, exclusive to the venue. And before I move on too, it's worth noting that Sony just opened their own indoor theme park in Chicago called Wonderverse.
Whoa.
And
that's a terrible name.
I went out there. It's so weird because I think the name is bad. No, there's no Sony branding on it.
Right.
So you just see Wonderverse and you're like, what is that?
Should have
if
been
they
like,
called it
like even Sony Presents, you know, or like,
well, Sony PlayStation is like a thing. So I don't know why they don't call it like Sony Playverse or Sony Play Universe or something like that. Like, but inside it's very cool. Inside it's very cool. It kind of reminds me of what Sega World or Disney Quest were kind of going for, where it's a mix of arcade machines, it's a mix of like VR experiences and like exclusive stuff. It's a mix of like themed food. There's like a Ghostbusters bar that's really cool. But I fear that it, like, if it doesn't do well, it'll close in a couple years, just like Sega World did. So it's kind of like when these sorts of experiences or amusement centers come up and they don't have like the backing from a place like Disney, you know, you probably want to run out there and experience it because it might not be there for long.
And right now, the way the economy is, it's a little, you know, you never know, and it's like even people aren't going to movies as much as they were for a while, you know. So,
well, I mentioned Disney there. Disney just closed their Star Wars hotel after less than a year, so it's like, you know, I would have liked to experience that, but oh well.
Right.
But talking about Sega World, it was a worldwide endeavor with a variety of layouts and settings. In the UK, Sega Worlds were usually a large complex, while in Japan, they were their own buildings in suburban areas. So this would make Sega a landowner, which of course has its ups and downs for a company, and as we learned over the past few years, Sega has since moved out of the arcade owning business, and that includes being the owner of the buildings themselves. And I think that was a big thing that a lot of people kind of didn't understand when the announcement was made. They're like, oh, Sega's not making arcade games anymore. They are, but they don't own and operate these buildings and these facilities. So they don't, you know, like pay staff and create uniforms and have these like, you know, like food operation. They still like those sorts of things kind of exist within the company, because Joyopolis is still around and they do manage like resorts and hotels. But yeah, it definitely over the last few years became a strain for them to be like basically landlords for like dozens of locations. But some Sega World locations, they did have bowling alleys, shopping centers, department stores, and theme parks. And examples of these in Japan include Sega World Festival Gate and Sega World Rinku in Japan. So interestingly, despite seeming like a single global chain, Sega World was not dependent on one central company, but rather several regional divisions created by Sega. Japanese venues were managed by Sega Entertainment, while in Taiwan they were managed by Sega World Oi and Sega Amusement Taiwan. And these divisions were created specifically for their operations. So it wasn't like Sega Amusements of America where they were like creating arcade machines. It was more like their sole purpose was to run the Sega World Arcades in Taiwan. So the reason for that was that Sega had previously not traded in the country. So they also would sell the license to other companies. So, for example, in London, the company Leisure Exchange like licensed out the Sega name for the Sega Worlds there. So, like, as you can tell, it was not a centralized plan. It really was kind of like a name, and then you just apply that name to an amusement facility. But I mean, if you go onto the Sega Retro Wiki, like people listening, and you scroll through, there are hundreds of locations. So I can understand why they didn't want like one central team overseeing all this. But like, George, do you think this like plan helped or hurt Sega's efforts to rival Disney? Do you think this is the smart and right way to go about it?
What do you mean, like the idea of separating each region? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, it just seems like Sega World was a vague concept,
right? And I agree. I think you heard it because, like, think about Disneyland. If you go to Disneyland in California and then you randomly go to Florida and they're like totally different. There's like just the way the whole system is set up and how you get in there and how you play the games. You have to have a thing that fulfill, I guess, like a system to make people feel like you're in a brand, right? Like, can you imagine going from one Sega World to another and it's like, oh, if you're a traveling guy, especially. So I don't know. I think it's weird.
Well, and that's what you'd experience. Like a Sega World in Japan might just feel like any typical Sega arcade, but then a Sega World in London would feel like the wackiest theme park you've ever seen,
right? With
like Sonic all over the place. And yeah, I kind of understand why they did this, but I think if your grand plan is to rival Disney, you should really focus on less is more. So maybe have like 10 Sega World like theme parks in development. Start out with maybe 4 or 5 and see how that goes. But it really just seemed like, and I couldn't even find like proof that there was like a kit, you know, that they would like, or a Bible or something where they were like, these are the brand assets, you must apply them in this way. Like it really was, every region kind of did what they wanted. Even the logos weren't always the same, as we'll soon see. And as mentioned, like sometimes it was an arcade, sometimes it was a full-blown theme park, but they were all Sega Worlds. And let's be honest, like if you go to a mall in Japan and it's like a single room with like 20 arcade machines and it's called Sega World, does that really feel like a world? No. You know, it's like, imagine if Disney had Disneyland, but then you went to the mall and there was also a Disneyland and it was like a couple arcade machines. And you're like, that's not like the one I saw in California. What's going on here? So yeah, I do think that they could have been a lot more successful if there was one entity behind all of this, maybe with a little bit more control. I honestly think GameWorks is a better example of how to do it right. Even though all but one GameWorks, I think, exists now, at the very least, GameWorks existed for a good, 30 years, which is more than Sega World could say.
I agree with that. They still have a website. They still have a website. That means they're still around, right?
That's true. Yeah, they do. Yeah, so because there is so much to be seen in photos, I thought at this point in the show we would do sort of a Sega World slideshow, and we'll show off the various venues, comment on them as we see them, and we'll go country by country, and I have little tidbits to share. So, George, if you want to throw up Taiwan there.
No, it's beautiful. Yeah. Look at that floor. Shiny.
Shiny as hell.
Whoever waxed it, give them props.
And for those audio listeners, I'll do my best to describe them, but there are 50 images,
right.
So I'm not gonna describe every single one. But yeah, as far as for this first one, so this is like kind of your typical
There's like a mall.
Sega World Taiwan. It's at a mall.
Yeah.
The second one, you can see they put a little more effort into it. It's got like kind of a funky entrance with blue stairs and like purple lights.
Purple everywhere.
But it's still, once you look inside, once you peek past all that like fanciness, it's still just, you know, like an arcade, like a fancy arcade. The third one here,
it's like back to the cave age, like
that's
Stone Age.
pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
It's like Sega World Flintstones. So you go in, there's like dinosaurs. So as you can see, like the theming was all over the place. Like the first two kind of look like just a nice arcade, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait, is this Jurassic Park? What is this?
When your daughter gets older, try to convince her that's where you used to play video games. Like, this is just how we did back then.
That's Barney, I'm gonna go to Sega World. But yeah, in Taiwan, Sega World existed quite early. It started in 1992 to almost the current day. In fact, I think there very well could be one Sega World still existing, and it's in Taiwan. It's not confirmed, but from what I last heard,
let's go.
Yeah, so the country was the first outside Japan to receive the naming scheme, and they kept the name for the longest time out of any territory with the remaining location, which is called OE, which apparently is still open to this day. And despite being rebranded to the generic Sega name, it still continues to operate officially using the Sega World name. So you'll like call them maybe, and they'll be like Sega World. So it seems like Gigo did not get their hands on this one. It seems like, I don't know, like it feels like when you go to some Asian countries, like when they get a brand, they hold on to it.
Right? Why not?
Because they're like it could even be like, oh, Disney had a presence here 30 years ago. They left shortly thereafter, but we're keeping the Disney signs up because it's better than the shit that we could make up. You know?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen too much of Taiwan. I don't know, but it's like when you go to Mexico and they're just using Sonic to sell whatever merchandise they have. You know, like hot dogs.
Right. I mean, not to knock Taiwan, but you know, there's kind of like this made in Taiwan sort of thing where it's like it's not as nice. So I feel like if they get something that is a little premium, like Sega World, they're going to hold on to that name. These last few are just some more looks at a Sega World in Taiwan. Very bright. It looks like a clown.
Yeah, this is like
a clown house. Yeah. And you can see some of these wild machines. There's Power Wheels from Taito. There's this really weird arcade game in the fourth photo of a like man climbing a coconut tree away from a shark. Do you see that?
Yeah, I do.
And then some Sega game, Versus Exciting Battle. I don't know what game that is. And then Manx TT. So yeah, they look pretty cool, but I think Japan could probably one-up them. So in Japan, the home to Sega World and Sega, the name was originally used for a small number of family-oriented venues in Ito Yokado department stores during 1989. So that's the first use of the Sega World name. In 1990, Sega World Tokyo Roof opened, and centers aimed at families like O2 Park Sega World began to expand into amusement venues, creating the template which would be adapted for other countries throughout the decade. By the mid-90s, the Sega World name was used for large out-of-town buildings commissioned by Sega, featuring bright decor, and by this time, hundreds of Sega Worlds were opened, making it the predominant chain of amusement venues by Sega. However, a proportion of these later closed during a company-wide restructure during the early 2000s, and eventually new venues stopped opening altogether throughout Japan by 2004. After a logo redesign in the early 2000s, Sega began experimenting with the formula, opening more centers in indoor retail locations, and during the start of the 2010s, the name fell out of use in favor of general Sega game centers. Ironically, it was at this point that Sega World fulfilled its original purpose, and yet Sega had dropped the name that started it all. In January 2022, Genda Gigo announced that it had acquired all of Sega's remaining arcade company shares, and all Sega Worlds were renamed Gigo, thus killing the Sega World name. So, as I was talking there, were you showing off any of these beautiful photos?
I was. There's this weird one that looks like some 80s new wave cover where it's like yellow, black, and...
Yeah, so that is like
art.
It's a virtual world.
Right.
It's called Virtual World, and you like enter it. I don't know what it is, but I just thought it was so mysterious.
And then there's this one with these ladies that work here. They kind of look like they're going to sell you some sort of like, you know what? You know what is this?
Are you talking about the Dippin' Dots
Dippin'
lady?
Dots. Yeah. Okay. Never mind.
Yeah.
I thought it was a cash register. I'm like, why are they like they're going to serve you food? But never mind. That makes sense.
Now this is my favorite one is the one with Sonic and Tails on the big circle
that looks ridiculous.
out front. That's wild. And that one actually existed for quite some time. Like there were pictures from when Sega Bits was like around,
right?
That this was still up.
But does it kind of give you kind of like a low budget, low quality haunted theme park vibe a little bit?
A little bit. But if Sonic's there, I'm not scared. He'll take care of me.
That's true. The helicopter?
This one here
this?
With this giant machine, it's the Sega Amusement Simulator AS1. I don't know much about it. I'm sure I could look it up, but it seems like a rideable VR machine. Very cool.
Wow, these chairs are not comfortable.
I love some of these interiors. Yeah, they just look so dated.
Right.
It's the colors, the lines. You can see here they're serving food or treats inside of one of them, I think.
I like
Maybe
that
it's
jukebox,
like
though. It has nice look.
It is pretty sweet, yeah.
The next one?
Let's see. Is this with the looks like
dairy, the desserts they serve?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there, but there's something that catches my eye in the back. Do you see that green sign with Sonic on it?
That's what caught your eye. I'm all looking at the food. I'm like, I wonder what that tastes like.
What's he doing? Is he like playing soccer or something? It looks, I don't know what he's doing.
Just chilling.
It appears to be a holiday or something, though, because I think I see a Christmas tree.
What about this building, the pink and purple one?
Yeah, this is just another Sega World facility. I don't think the theming is all that great on this one. But this is a good example of the rebranding. So if you go to the next image, this is the same building.
There's like an IHOP.
I believe it's the same building. It feels like it is years later. And it's using the Sonic Adventure Sonic.
Oh, yeah.
There's an interesting, on the left side, a circle, it says SW. It looks nothing like any Sega World or Sega branding, but it's probably Sega World. It's like, I don't know. I don't really like this branding. I think it looks cheap. I think the Sega logo is much stronger than...
whatever this is.
This, like... It's just like chunky orange words with like a star. Kind of reminds me of Sega Pico.
I wonder what their discussion was like, oh, orange is the new cool color. Everyone wants to go to places with this not popping out orange color.
Let's go to Tokyo Roof. This one's like the coolest looking venue.
Right. It's like a casino,
Isn't that sweet?
Casino nights.
Yeah. So that's Tokyo Roof. The next one, we're actually jumping to China. So Sega World, they had a small presence in China as Sega World Shanghai. It was actually located in the basement of a shopping mall. And what I thought was interesting is it says it is thought to be no longer in production or in operation. Oh. But it's like, so they don't know if it might still be open.
What do you mean?
But they don't know.
How do they not know?
I don't know. That's what I don't get. Can someone go to China and figure this out for us? I'd like to know. But I love the branding inside. You see here, it's like Sonic the Screensaver wallpaper and all these Sonic pictures on the wall. There's a mix of Sonic Adventure era Sonic and classic Sonic.
If I ever go,
someone's playing Time Crisis 3.
If I ever go to China, I'm gonna have to go find out if this place still exists.
Yeah, it's in a basement too.
Even creepier.
Even creepier. And that's the only picture we have of that. The next one, in South Korea, Sega World had 2 game centers which existed briefly. How brief? Well, little is known about these venues to the point that it's unknown when they opened or closed, with the only window of time being a few months between 2005 and 2007. So, from what I gather, these were only open for like a handful of months.
Oh.
I don't believe that. That's insane, because look at the work they put into these.
It's ridiculous.
They look. But what's interesting too is and this is what I don't understand. So they said this existed.
Wow.
Yeah, 2005. Okay. Yeah, so this is the rebranding. You see that with the chunky orange.
Right. Ugly.
But look at that. It's like you go inside and it's like a little like cartoon. It's like The Simpsons or something on the inside, like blue skies and green trees. And
very like tropical Sega feel to it.
I guess, yeah. There's like little the pillars are actually trees. So the information desk lady, she looks like she's pretty happy to be there. I love her little
vest.
Sega cloth vest. I want to wear it.
It's probably a collectible now.
This next one I just thought was really funny. It's the House of the Dead 3 and Ghost Squad, like 2 very violent games in the middle of this like cartoonish kiddie setting.
Perfect.
It just looks off.
It's perfect.
Yeah. The next one is a Crazy Taxi machine. I've never seen that marquee though. Have you seen that before?
Not that marquee, no.
It's cool. It's like a license plate, but it's like all distorted. It's the stand-up version of Crazy Taxi, and next to it is Wild Riders.
What do you think about stand-up machines? I think they're pretty cool, but obviously everyone would rather play the sit-down machine. But
sit-downs are preferred, but stand-up ones, like, they do take up a lot less space and are probably a lot easier to repair.
Oh, yeah. And they do the job just fine. But I wonder if people that play, like, Crazy Taxi at a high level would be like, no, I can't play it on that stand-up thing.
Oh, yeah. I gotta sit for Crazy Taxi. That it does feel weird, because at Galloping Ghost, they have, I think, Outrun and Power Drift are standing cabinets. And then all the other super scalar ones are sit-down. It just feels weird to, like, stand and play Outrun.
Right.
Or even stand and play Hang On. That's weird, because it's like you're standing but doing the handlebars.
We got these rides.
Oh, I like this one. It's Doraemon and Ultraman.
Right.
Like, and these are about in the same vein as like the Waku Waku patrol car.
Right.
For Sonic. These are Sega branded. I can see on the side. So that's kind of cool. And then the shooting gallery, it's like you're shooting little animals.
Just in case Civil War pops up in South Korea, they got their boys trained right here with these
exactly
big rifles.
And then here's the other location. It's pretty cute.
It kind of looks like a record store with all the posters in the front and stuff. Like, I don't know, it looks like a shop.
Yeah. I think that's on in the front there to the left is one of those, I think maybe like
UFO
machines where you can print out either photos or nail art. I think there were Sega made machines where you could make little stickers for your fingernails for girls.
Right.
And sadly,
Outback
the next picture,
Steakhouse.
it's Sega next, which I think just closed all their locations or a lot of them.
Oh no, I need to go now.
But it's kind of funny. Like, imagine you show someone this picture and you say, which one of these is out of business in 30 years? And they go, oh, Sega. And they go, nope, it's Outback Steakhouse.
I need to get refunds to all my Outback Steakhouse.
I thought this picture was really cool. It's the arcade, but empty.
Right. It looks
like either
a lot of work
before. And I can't tell, though, if this is them setting it up or if this is showing how quickly it came and went. Like, they cleared it out.
Right.
But you can see it again, like filled with stuff. And then there's this cute little sign where it says, see you again, but all the letter spacing's wrong. So it says, se, eu, aga, and...
Yeah, well, I mean, they don't really read that at all. They just see it and they go, cool, that's English writing.
And then on your way out, it has an Outback Steakhouse sign. So
Perfect. We know exactly where we're going next.
that kind of sounds like I would. So would you, like, if I said to you, "Hey, let's go to Outback Steakhouse in Sega World," would you be in?
I'm packing my bags right now. Let's go.
Nice.
South Korea.
Let's do it. Well, when I was a kid, we could do laser tag and Rainforest Cafe. That was our thing.
Oh, really?
That was pretty sweet. Yeah. Let's see. So yeah, now we're jumping to the UK. We're going to take a little photo break for a moment, but for English speakers, Sega World's perhaps most synonymous with London and Sydney locations. And trust me, they are beefy enough for a whole episode on their own, which I think will happen because as I was doing these notes, there was so much that I could cover that I was like, I think it's best to save it. But I don't want to lessen their size or impact by including them with all these other territories we just mentioned. So when you put it in perspective, though, Sega World London and Sega World Sydney were just parts of the larger Sega World whole. So, like, yeah, you could say Sega World Sydney was, like, big and probably the most ambitious of all these. But then you look at Japan, you're like, they had 100 locations. So it's like, you know.
Right.
In fact, even when you take UK into account, there were more than one location. Sega Worlds existed in Bournemouth, Tamworth, Birmingham, Wolverhampton, and London. And we're going to be focusing on Sega World London for the UK. The venue opened in September 1996 and was the first theme park opened outside of Japan by Sega. At the time, it claimed to be the largest indoor theme park in the world, occupying 10,200 square meters on 7 floors. And before we get into the slideshow again, let's take a look at each floor of Sega World London. So here, if you want to pull the map up and describe to the people what we're looking at here.
I see that you start on the bottom right, and then you go upstairs, and there's a Sonic Star. Is that what it says on the side? Sega something, Sega Street, and then there's a McDonald's, right?
Sega Store, yeah. There's a Sega Store, and then there's a McDonald's. And you know, if you're a frequent user or visitor of our Sega Bits Discord, you'll know that I talk about McDonald's a lot, and that's because McDonald's is officially a Sega restaurant.
I mean, officially,
they did multiple Happy Meals.
Okay.
They existed inside Sega World. So
all right, I'll give you to it. What about Mad Bazooka? Isn't that a gum?
Well, yeah. There's each floor had a theme, and they also had unique attractions, which, like I said, we're not going to cover them on this,
right,
but we'll definitely be going through each floor.
So what's an AS1?
What's that?
AS1?
That's that machine we saw earlier. Remember that giant? That is an AS1. And I don't know much about them. I don't know what kind of cabinet they are. Let me see. Let me look them up on Sega Retro.
There's a sports arena in the same building. And then let's say you get... Sorry, go on.
Mm-hmm. The AS1, or Advanced System 1, is an interactive motion simulator. It's a mid-size attraction developed by Sega AM5. It was developed in the early 90s and released to the world in 93 after several appearances at trade shows. They had collaborative production or ride films with Douglas Trumbull and Michael Jackson. It became one of the signature features of Sega's large amusement facilities, including Joyopolis and Sega World. And the rides included Muggo, Michael Jackson in Scramble Training, Megalopolis, Tokyo City Battle, and then an unreleased game called Sega Super Coaster. So there you go.
And they have
this could be a Sega Talk episode,
right? They have a sports arena, and then if you're bored of the sports arena and you're tired, you go upstairs to another floor. There's 6 floors, by the way. We're on floor 3, and in floor 3 you got Ghost Hunt if you're into a spooky mood, and then you have, what is that rainbow thing? I can't read it from right here. the carnival, they call it.
The carnival.
And right next to the carnival, they have a McDonald's again. You don't have to go all the way back down. I know. They meet you halfway.
I know, isn't that nice?
Yeah, because
you got 2 of them.
You never know when you need nuggets or chicken nuggets and a Mountain Dew. And so now we go to the 4th floor. Here we got a flight deck, space mission. What is that? I can't even read that logo. Something Planet.
Aqua Planet.
Aqua Planet and a racetrack. That's 4 in 1 floor. Now we go to the 5th floor, and it just says bathroom. Okay. Probably my favorite. Cool. But isn't it not good to have... Or I guess they all have bathrooms, but this is a really big bathroom?
Yeah, I think floor 5 is the bathroom floor.
Right, so like that's where the big business is happening. All the other ones are mini bathrooms. If you really are serious about taking a dump.
Floor 6 has a Sega Saturn, though.
Does it, though? Where? I just see the...
yeah, there's a little...
Oh, I see.
There's logo. A little Sega Saturn logo. Yeah, it's on the map below, so that's kind of cool. But yeah, so that's the layout, and I actually looking at the next photo now. I'll walk you through each of those floors. So we have the reception desk. This is where you would get your tokens and attraction tickets. You have pictures taken with Sonic statues. You get to play Sega Saturn games. There was also an interactive information center, projection video screens displaying promotional films, and let's see, the first attraction, Beast in Darkness, with the exit leading out onto the following floor. And Beast in Darkness, like, again, this could be a Sega Talk in and of itself, just because there's so many unique experiences that were only in Sega World London and like Tokyo Joyopolis pretty much. And you go up to the next floor to Combat Zone. This was more akin to a dimly lit conventional amusement arcade. It had black and yellow striped decor and had a selection of 50 action games, including Virtua Cop 2, Fighting Vipers, as well as non-Sega titles like Time Crisis and Area 51.
I like Time Crisis, but still,
This is probably your favorite floor, George. Racetrack had extensive theming, replicas of race cars, and 70 racing games, most notably back-to-back 8-player deluxe setups of Daytona USA and Manx TT Superbike with live commentators. They had hired people who would commentate 8-player Daytona USA. How sick is that?
I know. Like, how much money were they spending on this? So, like, can you imagine... Can you imagine the guy just like making fun of you? Like, oh, here he goes, Barry again, trying again to be number 1, but we all know he's not.
It's, God, a lot of money, yeah. A lot of money goes into this. And then the floor's attraction, officially known as Aqua Nova at previous Sega amusement theme parks, was renamed and localized as Aqua Planet. One of Damon Hill's F-115C racing cars from the 1993 Formula One season was situated on the floor for photo ops. During that season, Hill drove with Alan Prost for Williams, who was famously sponsored by Sega at the time. Next up, we have Flight Deck. You can see this big like airplane floating in the sky.
Oh, yeah.
This was the aviation-themed area. It had 20 flying games, taking titles like Sky Target and Wing War, as well as Namco's Prop Cycle. At one time, it had G-Lock on the R360 machine.
Oh, nice.
And let's see, it was promoted as one of the venue's premier attractions. Much like Flight Deck's space was taken up by VR-1 Space Mission. Hanging from the floor's ceiling was the first commercially available Harrier jump jet, so that's real.
Wow.
And it was transported to the venue in the months prior to its being towed through London.
What a budget.
As a boat. Yeah, so like insane budget. The Carnival was a brightly lit area with decor loosely based on Sonic the Hedgehog games. Had 80 arcade games, typically UFO catchers, prize redemption, prize desk to reward ticket payouts. Also located on the floor was Sega Kids, which featured a McDonald's outlet and indoor play equipment for young children.
Nice.
Initially, only one attraction was installed on the floor, within the park's opening, which was Ghost Hunters, which was localized under the name Ghost Hunt. This number would increase to 3 with the additions of the Small House of Grandish 3D sound room attraction, developed by Human in late 1996, and the Power Sled Simulator after 1997. So it was a pretty happening kids area. And then finally, we have the sports area. The final floor housed 90 sports games, included Sega-made examples like Virtua Striker and Sega Bass Fishing, as well as unconventional ones like SegaSonic the Hedgehog, which we covered not too long ago on Sega Talk, and Sonic the Fighters. On opening day, Virtua Fighter 3's official UK launch occurred on that level. So, Virtua Fighter 3 debuted on opening day of Sega World London. The floor housed 2 attractions, Mad Bazooka and a pair of the AS1 motion simulators. Mad Bazooka was closed and removed around 98, and it is possible that Sega Shop used the area it occupied and other parts instead. So, wow. Yeah, as you can see, like, a lot was going on at Sega World. And there is even more. So let's look at slides 36 through 42. This gives us an idea of the entrance. There's this beautiful...
black and gold?
Like a black and gold entrance with Sonic running up top. Look at the inside. Look at the second slide.
Whoa.
Like, look at that.
That's Neon City for sure.
Isn't that flippin' cool?
Yeah.
Inside, you see this beautiful sign that says "Win a Sega Saturn."
Beautiful.
You'll notice too
so many
that
people too.
This Sega World, in at least in London and some other territories, they removed the space, so they mashed it together to be one word. Kind of like Sega Bits.
Kind of makes sense
Sega
though,
World.
because of the W and the A kind of lends itself to be together.
Mm-hmm. Pepsi ads all over the place too.
Right.
Which is interesting because I thought McDonald's served Coke. So, I don't know. But yeah, this was the Pepsi Trocadero was the theme in there. And again, you can see more of the venue. It just looks wild.
Right.
There were billboards, "Welcome to Sega World," with like a giant eye, well before Nagoshi's
Sega eye.
rebranded Sega Eye. Yeah. Wow.
Chubby Sonic.
And then this beautiful statue of
rest
Sonic.
in
Look
peace?
at that. I think they did.
Right?
I think
The
it
Sega
was one of the
Forever?
last things. Yeah, one of the last things Sega Forever posted was like the refurbishing of, I think, this statue.
Yeah.
We can also see the sports arena here. Very, very.
Very high.
Does that say soccer?
I think so.
That's weird because they don't call it soccer. And so yeah, that'll do it for Sega World London. Like I said, there's so much to cover with Sega World London. We had all those attractions we didn't really touch on. There's also the process of it being built, to its short history and the aftermath, as well as the various rides and attractions. So I make the Sega Talk promise that we will cover Sega World London on its own Sega Talk alongside Sydney. And before we leave London for Sydney, let's actually do a really cool fly-through Sega World in a 3D rendering. So on Sega Retro, there's some videos, and one of them is this really cool fly-through of the venue.
Want me to play it?
Yeah, let's check it out.
Wow. It's CGI.
Yeah, it's a CG rendering of what the place looked like.
It's like Is this like a concept?
I think so, yeah. It was like a concept for what the finished building would look like.
This is wild. You can tell there's budget on some of these. Like, look at all those screens. Come on.
I know, it's insane.
Like a football stadium. It looks like a level in, like, I don't know, Phantasy Star mixed with, like, Space Channel 5.
Yeah. Just so much money was spent on this.
And what year was this one? 97?
96, I think, and then it closed in, what was it, closed. Oh my God. So here's what's so heartbreaking about it. It opened in 1996 and closed in 1999. All of this money, all of this effort.
Was that the worst time in Sega's history if you think about it? It like
for 3 years.
Right, when
it closed just a few days before the Dreamcast released in the US.
Which would have kind of like, I think, would have gave it a little fire. Because I feel like there was a little more Sega fandom when the Dreamcast came out compared to the Saturn era.
Right, and so I have to wonder. I'm not trying to jump to the end here, but like I have to wonder if on paper, the losses, like the effort and time and money, it really comes down to money.
Right.
They don't care about effort and time.
Right.
The money involved in building these and the loss to ending them at only 3 years, was it worth it? Like, I don't know. Maybe this was a massive failure, because I look at this venue, and as I was talking earlier about Sony's Wonderverse, like I walk around there and I can see some effort put into it. It's very nice, but if it were to close in like 3 to 5 years, I'd be like, that's a shame. Oh well. But with this, like 3 years, only 3 years, and it was this massive 6-7 floor venue with all this theming and all those arcade machines. Like, you know, Galloping Ghost has a lot of machines. This is like if half of Galloping Ghost just like shut down. You know,
right.
It's like maybe not half. I don't know how many. I didn't do the math here, but it seems like there were at least 300 arcade machines in there. Oh, 200, maybe 200 or 300. But where did those go? Like, obviously there's stories about the R360 that was in there and how it was like it went somewhere else, maybe private collections. I don't know, but it's just, well, it's going to get worse, because now we're going to talk about Sega World Sydney. Sega World Sydney, it opened March 18th, 1997, and that one lasted until November 2000. Ouch.
I'm seeing a trend here.
Yeah, so you see that September to September for 99 through, or 96 to 99, here we are, March 97 to November 2000. It's just, that's even less time, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems like it, yeah.
Maybe a little more. No, a little bit more, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
barely.
Still, ugh. It was an indoor theme park. It was located on Darling Harbour in Sydney, Australia, and it was hailed as Australia's interactive Disneyland.
Wow.
The overall design was compared to Sega Japan's Joyopolis centers. The park featured 7 rides and simulators, a food court, and over 200 arcade machines. The overall theme of the venue was time travel, with past, present, and future sections connected by time tunnels.
Whoa.
The venue had a strong Sonic presence and focused largely on the Western designs of Sonic, Robotnik, Tails, and Princess Sally. These 4 were seen as the location's mascots and were seen in stage shows, statues, and souvenirs. In fact, this is where a bulk of Princess Sally merchandise that you see comes from. From my own collection, I don't own any Sega World Sydney stuff, but I do have like a Princess Sally like bath sticker of her on a on a jet ski, and then like a Pog. And I have to imagine if some of that came out from Sega World Sydney, like if they're going to be making any merchandise art, it's going to be for this. Other Sega characters also had a presence, with Bug from Sega Saturn, of all characters, being heavily promoted. The project was a collaboration between Jack Fun Pty Limited, Sega, and the Darling Harbour Authority. 80 million Australian dollars was invested to build the park, with work starting in 1994. The park itself was inside a massive custom-built complex, with Sega World taking up 10,000 square feet.
Well,
By 1999,
wow.
the park was seeing... Yeah, it's insane. And by 99, the park was seeing low attendance and suffered financial losses, causing Sega to pull out of the partnership and sell their portion to Jack Fun for 36 million Australian dollars. Jack Fun had hoped that the 2000 Summer Olympics would help them meet their 800,000 break-even point, but sadly they did not meet their goal, and the park closed for good in November 2000. So Oof. What are your thoughts on that, George?
It feels to me like there was this big deal to make this like a hyped up Sega Disneyland in Sydney, so people could go and visit.
Yeah.
But who goes to Australia? I'm not making fun of people in Australia. I'm sure it's great down there. Whatever you guys are doing down there, keep it up. But like, I just don't think that Sega World, especially during this time era, was enough of a brand for people to like fly to Australia or travel to Sydney just for Sega, because I don't know what Sega was in Australia or how the brand was in Australia, but I will say that in Saturn era is probably not the best time to be a Sega fan, I guess, like in popularity wise.
That's what's very interesting about these is that, it really was the Saturn era coming off of the Genesis, so it's like this big push for Sonic, but Sonic didn't really have a flagship game, and then any of the Saturn characters that they could show off were like
Bug?
not Knights, but instead it was Bug.
Right, that's all they had.
And it's interesting too. You know, just thinking about the locals, like being a Australian or UK Sega fan, your experience, your childhood experience was very different from ours because, you know, we interact with those British Sega fans, and it really seems like a big part of their upbringing were the magazines. They always talk about like Mean Machines and some of the other ones they had. They always talk about Sega World. And we didn't really have that. I feel like there were Sega magazines here, but they weren't as big. There weren't Sega Arcades or amusement things like they had. So it's interesting that they had a very different upbringing from us, I guess you'd call it. Let's look at this commercial for Sega World Sydney. It's a 30-second ad.
Play it. Oh. That weird Sonic, like, I don't even know what render that is from.
They say Sega, unfortunately.
Wild entry. Nickelodeon is there? $5. It doesn't really show too much of the... Oh, it has its own animation. Isn't that a reused animation?
I think it might have
I think I
been.
saw it in one of the Japanese commercials. Let me see. So,
Pretty sweet,
I was
though.
looking at the... okay, so... wait, they don't really show too much of the park, though. Isn't that kind of like...
It's interesting, yeah, because I think unlike a lot of the Sega World locations, because they're on a harbor, there is kind of an outdoor element to it. There's not much out there, some like a statue and some water fountains, but let's look at the brochure. It's a PDF on Sega Retro.
I'm looking at it. It's up.
This gives you a little better idea. So what you see here on page 1, it does a breakdown for the food court, retail, entertainment, birthday parties, functions, like corporate functions, which I love, like Corporate Sonic is there.
Oh no, Nestle is a sponsorship, and Visa and Coca-Cola. All the evil corporations of the world have gotten together to support this hippie blue hedgehog.
Yeah, but look at Corporate Sonic. He has a little red tie. He has a suitcase.
Where is the Corporate Sonic? Where is he at?
He's above the Nestle logo. Do you see him?
Oh, I do see him. Okay, never mind. That's pretty cute. Now I'm okay with it now.
Yeah.
Destroy the universe.
Good. Ticket prices are here. Adult unlimited ride passes were $25. Child or pensioner.
What's that?
I've never... Pensioner. That's like a
person that like served their country.
I think that's like a retired person who's on a pension.
We don't have those in America anymore.
What a pensioner must you must show your pensioner ID. Interesting.
They get more free stuff? Man,
I wonder if that's free government money.
Probably. Tax cuts.
And then, as you can see on the inside, we have a good look at the layout. So there is a little bit of an outdoor area, but really they're all directing you inside. You can see the past images of times gone by with Rail Chase,
is that
Ghost Hunter,
a
Timeless.
demon?
Yeah, that's a ghost.
Oh, back in the past. Oh, okay. That was back then. I remember now.
Yeah, we don't have ghosts anymore.
Ooh, thank God. We have Hamburger, though.
In the present,
Yeah.
we have Magic Motion, the Visionarium, the Center Stage, and Birthday Rooms.
There was no birthdays before the present.
And then in the future, we have Aquanova, Mad Bazooka, VR1, and then the AS1 again. So that's showing up again with the Michael Jackson mission. And I remember not too long ago, I think that footage was discovered, and I was so confused as to what it was. Do you remember that?
The what?
People were like saying, "Oh, it's like Michael Jackson Sega game like footage." And I
Oh,
was like,
yeah.
"What is this?"
I do remember when that came out.
Yeah, it was discovered not too long ago. And again, like that's why I think we need to do a whole other episode on just the two theme parks, the London and this one, because then we could actually get into what the hell these weird little like that ghoul, like what is that ghoul?
Right.
And then let's take a look at some pictures from Sega World itself. So we have this beautiful outdoor statue of Sonic and his wife, Princess Sally.
Right.
He's so big compared to her. Look at him kneeling. If he stood up, he'd be like
double her size.
His head would be towering over her. And then sadly, look at the next one.
Oh, them in the garbage.
Yeah, this is them now.
This is like this is at the top of their corporate rule, and then this is when the revolution happens.
Yeah, exactly. This is like in museums now. You go and you're like, oh, look at that. Like, you know, aren't limbs missing? You know, you just don't think about it, but that's what they used to look like.
Whoa, that's a weird building.
Yeah, so this is the building they built specifically for Sega World. It's this like wild red and blue building.
There's like a cone on top?
Yeah, and the Sega World Sydney logo is unique in that they don't have that typical branding. They have the SEGA. The letters are all kind of tilted, and it's blue, yellow, green, and red for the letter colors. And then I love this kid's like digging in the off to the right. He's like sticking his hand in the little lake.
That's what he came for. He's fishing.
Yeah. On the inside, it's just wild. Like, look at these pictures.
Carnival.
But what I don't
look how
get
big
is
everything is.
It's so big and huge, but then the actual used space is like a 4-player arcade game below it. You know, it's just like it seems so opulent and almost unnecessary. You look at the next one too. It's like
no one's there.
Wow.
It's like 5 people, but it's supposed to, like I feel like they thought this was going to be like Disney. You know, when you go into Disney, when you go into a building, it's there to accommodate a bunch of people walking back and forth, not really putting arcade machines or waiting for people to wait around. And I feel like this is what this was designed as, like a spectacle you walk through for a ride. But yeah, it didn't work out that way, it seems like, because it's pretty empty.
And I think you can see those time tunnels there. So I think those are like the rings that you walk through. Next up, we see this like hallway, and you can kind of see the ghoul's face off to the left there for Ghost Chasers.
Oh, yeah.
And again, the next one is kind of like it's a little blurry, but you can see him leaning over the logo there.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, it looks cool. It looks funky.
I like the design of the place. It's really dark. This is something I've noticed in these. They want to do the dark theater kind of look. Like you know how when we did the Sega Arcade Astro City arcade cabinet, candy cabinet history. They talked about making everything bright and sterile and making it feel like it's welcoming. This one just feels like I'm in a haunted place every time. Like it's like so dark and. Right?
Well, this image we're looking at, the one number 49, it looks like the set for a Nickelodeon game show, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
And then lastly, most notably, the Sonic Live in Sydney stage show. The show was a 90-minute program based around the Saturday morning cartoon. Took place between Sonic 2 and Sonic 3. And the story sees the Death Egg crashing in Australia.
What?
And Robotnik Yeah, and Robotnik taking over Sydney. So, with Sonic, Tails, and Sally thwarting his plans, most of the music came from Sonic 2 soundtrack and featured 3 musical numbers. So Sonic sang What Are We Waiting For? Robotnik sang Give Me Chaos, and Sally sings Thank You for Being You. The show lasted for only 1 year and closed due to a lack of interest, and the show was replaced with a puppet show remake, which we can see the puppets here. So
nice.
This is a montage of Sega World images, but what do you think of that Sonic puppet?
It's kind of weird. It's kind of creepy a little bit, but
Yeah.
I do want to hear what they sounded like. Like, I want to hear Sonic's voice as a Australian. I think that would be beautiful. I think it would be amazing.
Well, and looking at these other ones, you can see Grounder there to the right of Sonic.
Oh, yeah.
You see Robotnik. I like Tails. He's like in a pot. He looks like a stoner.
Oh, yeah.
And then Sally looks really rough.
Yeah,
like,
poor Sally. She's had a rough life.
Yeah. But they had this interesting thing where Sonic had one real hand. Do you see that? So, like, the puppeteer would operate his mouth, and then the other hand would be his hand.
Oh,
with,
okay.
like, yeah, so he could, like, wave and point. And then there was this big bird on top of the stage above Sonic, with the next showtime being shown there. But yeah, you were saying you wanted to hear the music, and I have good news for you. We're not going to do it on this one,
right.
But well, no footage exists. There are the photos we showed, as well as a studio recorded CD performance, which was sold at the park gift shop. So after you watch this beautiful performance, you can go through and mommy and daddy will buy you a CD and you can relive it. So that's really cool.
Nice.
Like Sega World London, the Sydney location has enough content for its own Sega Talk or a shared one. So don't worry if we miss something. We do want to cover those further. I want to listen to that song. I want to take a look at this Michael Jackson thing. So we'll get to those. And before we close out, I do want to take a look at some of the merch that you could buy at Sega World.
What?
So the credit for these photos, they go to Sega Retro Wiki, Treasure Hunting Sonic. You can see his stuff on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And then Sega World Sydney Memoriam, which is a Twitter account that reposts stuff like this. So the first bit of merch here we have is the CD with the music. And interestingly, Knuckles is there, but there was no sign of him in the show, so I don't know.
The cup?
Cup with Sonic and Sally holding
something?
Coca-Cola bottles.
You know what? I don't really like... I mean, it kind of looks Rastafarian in a way. It's weird, but it's not really Sega, right?
With the colors?
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, the colors are a little weird, and then this frame is like just... I don't know. The art is really bad.
It almost feels like a meme material. Like whatever you put there is the joke or whatever. They're all
yeah, exactly. Like I want to see like someone giving birth to a child
or
in that.
Like someone falling down, like
or someone being found guilty of a crime.
Yeah, anything someone does embarrassing, you just put it inside that frame. But yeah.
And then here are the tokens, really cool looking tokens with Sonic's head on them. I'd love to have one of these.
So you can what?
My favorite
you can
of all of
your
this,
whole
if
life.
I could have one of these.
Heads or tails?
Do you see the Sega Smashed Penny from London?
Oh, yeah, I do. You want a Smashed Penny?
I have a sizable pressed penny collection, actually.
Do you really?
I am a collector.
Of the
I
Smashed
do.
Penny?
When I go to like when we visit someplace and they have one, I'll like get one, and then I have a booklet at home I can put them in. So,
did not know that.
Maybe that'll be a Patreon exclusive. I'll show my Smashed Penny collection.
Ooh.
This one's cool. This is the entry card for Sega World London. Very futuristic. It looks like a Sonic credit card.
Kind of looks like it's shining.
It does. Very beautiful. This next one's...
What?
Yeah, this is from Treasure Hunting Sonic's collection. It's a...
What?
I don't know if
It doesn't look official. It looks like those, like, when you go to a concert and then they're like, after party, here you go, and they give you
Yeah, so this was an event going on at Sega World, Sydney, free to be summer dance party. Sonic is basically cross-dressing or in drag. He's wearing high heels. You can see his feet, which is really unsettling.
Yeah.
And the artwork is from Ian Jobson. So
I don't know.
You can blame them.
I mean, I like it. I think this should be the official design for Sonic from now on.
The event, surprisingly, for like cross-dressing Sonic was between 2 and 6 p.m., which seems like a really bad time for like
putting on all your makeup and dress to go out.
I'm not in the mood to listen to like DJ Chip at like 2 p.m.
I feel like there would be a lot of furries in this party.
Yeah. Next one is a organizer, Sega World themed organizer.
I like the stripes. It doesn't need the yellow, but it looks nice.
Yeah, it looks pretty nice. A T-shirt that says Generation Sonic.
It's a pretty bad shape.
With Sonic, Sally, Tails, and Robotnik.
This is Treasure Sonic's house, obviously.
Yeah.
I don't even want to know how much that costs, but it's a cool collectible.
Looks a little rough. And then this one's a pin.
Wow.
Of Sonic, Tails, and Robotnik. My favorite piece is this next one. It's a hat with Princess Sally.
Oh, dude.
And it looks like her hands are busting through the brim to hold her name.
Yeah, to hold her sign. I like it, yeah. Everyone knows that's so Princess Sally thing to do.
This one is the Sega World Sydney loyalty card reward system. So
somebody went 4 times.
Looks like you use this card.
Oh, no. My bad.
I'm trying to figure out how this system works. So it says item, ERP, retail purchase. Oh, okay. So if you do certain things, you get stamps. So like if you buy a large cup of Coke, you get a stamp. If you pay the $5 entry, you get a stamp.
You go to the toilet floor.
I don't know what a URP is, but that gives you 4. I guess if you burp, ERP.
Nice.
I don't know.
Shot
what's
glasses?
The next one? Oh, this is cool. Yeah, it's a mug.
Oh.
Ironically, it's Sega World Sydney merch made in Thailand, where there's also Sega World.
Nice.
But yeah, it's different poses for Sonic. Some of them from art we've seen before. Other ones that looks like that someone just like made it up. It looks kind of bad.
Yeah.
I dig this. It's a denim jacket with Sonic, Tails, and Sally peeking, but in the wrong place. I feel like they should have been coming out of the pocket.
I thought they were all staring at your massive chest when you wear this.
Yeah, isn't that weird?
It's a kid's
They're looking
thing.
they're looking at coconuts in like the other pocket. It's kind of weird.
I thought maybe they were looking at the button, and the button's a coconut. Or even better, they should have made them rings.
Well, this next one's like a Robotnik drink cup where he looks like.
That's fucking creepy. What the fuck? I would never give this. Why is he trying to give you a kiss?
So what's your thought on this Sega World merch so far? It's kind of rough, isn't it?
I think it's kind of rough. Yeah. So far, yeah. Like the denim jacket and stuff. That kind of stuff seems kind of easy to make. Like if we wanted to, we could go to some place and get these embroidered and put out, like denim jackets. So I mean that stuff's the easiest. Everything else seems a little rough, to be honest. Yeah, like the shirts and stuff. It's nothing amazing, good design wise. Is what I'm saying.
The plush dolls are pretty rough too. We're gonna see those. Tails looks messed up.
What the hell's up with his eyes?
Yeah, they gave him like googly eyes.
And Sally's drunk.
Sally's drunk, and then
it's 8 a.m. Stop drinking, please.
Sonic's eyes are like too big and round, and then Robotnik looks like, I don't know, something happened to him.
He doesn't even look like himself.
So yeah, that's the Sega World merch, and I don't own any, and as much as I'd like to for the curiosity of it, I don't feel like I'm missing out. I don't mean to. It just all of it looks really, I don't know.
I understand in a collector standpoint, if you're like, I want to collect everything,
Right.
you kind of need it. But for me, I'm good. I'm not that much of a collecting's cool, but when you start collecting to the point where you're collecting that kind of like you're getting that to the point, I'm like, maybe it's a little too much. To me, it's like
yeah,
I
just
appreciate it though, looking at it, and I appreciate that somebody has this stuff that I could see.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like a product of its time and a great way to like remember this weird era from Sega's past. But like, I guess just the quality control is kind of off. And again, going back to the Sega World concept, I feel like they needed a like decision maker at the top looking at this stuff and having a unified brand, unified logo, merchandise. Like, remember, this merchandise is coming out after merchandise that looks a lot better has already come out. Like, there are, I can't show it. I have a Sonic plush in my little cabinet there from 1993 that looks way better than this stuff from 1997, 1998. So it's like they were capable of making good-looking merch, and they just kind of didn't. I don't get this look for Robotnik at all. Like he looks terrible. I don't know, but I don't mean to be a downer. It's just I don't know. So yeah, the Sega World project. So from 1989 through to just a few years ago, the Sega World project was born. It thrived. It died. It evolved, and then it died again. Sega's plans to become a competitor to Disneyland never came to fruition. However, their efforts through the 90s did pay off, albeit briefly, as the concept of a Sega-branded indoor theme park did thrive through the early 2000s. Unfortunately, as mentioned at the top of the show, the Sega World name was soon phased out, and Sega, as of 2022, has left the arcade amusement center business. However, Sega still does own and operate their Joyopolis locations, and I think just last year or a year ago, a Joyopolis sports facility opened, so they're not done yet. And but yeah, that closes the book on Sega World. You can't go to one unless you go to Thailand and find that one that supposedly exists.
Ask around, and where's the basement with the Sega World?
Yeah, if anyone in Shanghai can go and find the basement, I'd like to know that one. But would you say it was a failure or a success?
Failure, because they wanted to compete against Disney and they didn't. So, and to be honest, that's kind of like a lofty goal to have. And I know your next question is going to be why I thought it was a success or a failure, but like,
yeah,
Sega was at the worst time financially. They were trying to launch a new console that literally bankrupted them. So, and then now they had these like $80 million plus amusement parks. They were trying to compete against Disney, and people obviously weren't going to them. If you notice, like the Sydney, like the locations are so bizarre. Like you said, people travel to LA all the time, or Chicago or New York, but you chose Sydney. I'm not trying to be like Sydney's not great, but like to compete against Disney, I don't know if you want to start there. You might want to start at the like maybe even Orlando, maybe Tampa Bay, somewhere with nice incentives tax wise towards you, and then slowly...
That's a good point, though I also think Sega was in a unique position where they were a partner with Disney on their games. So, you don't want to go head-to-head with the company that you are also...
doing video game branding with.
Licensing with. Yeah, so it's like they were probably like, well, where does Disney not exist so that we can't look like a threat, So we can... And it didn't take Disney long to move into their own... amusement center arcade business and kind of become a competitor to Sega World with the Disney Quest for a time. So, and unlike Sega, Disney can afford to fail at Disney Quest, but Sega really can't afford to fail at Sega World. So was it a failure or a success? I think for a time it was a success, but I think the big red flag and kind of sign that it was a failure was the fact that they spent years of development for these London and Sydney locations, and they only existed for 3 years.
Yeah.
And so I think the lesson for consumers or for video game fans is when something like these open, visit them now, because they might not be around in a year or 3 years. Like, go to Wonderverse in Oak Brook, Illinois, because it might be gone someday. I agree. And as for the legacy of Sega World, like, I think we've seen the legacy come and go. I think the legacy was those last 10 or 15 years of Sega in the arcade business, because we saw that they did find some success in Japan, and then they largely left. So now it's just Joyopolis. I'm glad Joyopolis is still around. I think a lot of people don't realize that Sega still operates it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they don't consider it to be an arcade. It's an amusement center, or it's like a theme park, really. So yeah, it's bittersweet. Now I'm sad. Yeah. So anything else you want to say before we read the memories from our Patreon supporters?
No. Let's read the memories.
All right. Well, if you support us on Patreon at any level, you can share your memories. So we have one here from Ben Hayward. He says, I distinctly remember visiting Sydney, Australia as a young child and staring dreamily at Sega World, asking my parents if we could go, but not being able to. Wish I'd been able to go there when I had the chance. When I visited Sydney now, I still remember where it was. Boy, that's sad. Michael S. says, I went to Sega Joyopolis in Tokyo. It was super fun. They had a Sonic game where you ran on a treadmill. Yeah, I talked about that. House of the Dead in a chair that could swing you around, in an arcade racer that was in an actual car that moved on a platform. Yeah, you talked about that, the initial D. So, Michael and Ben, they're kind of a lesson there. Like, Ben didn't get to take that chance and it was gone. Michael took that chance, and, yeah, if you see an arcade and you're like, man, I should check that out. Check it out, because it might be gone next week. Speaking of arcades, in the end of April, I'm hosting another meetup. Super chill, super casual. You show up and play games. It'll be fun. There's no surprises or special guests. No stressing. It's just chill.
It's gonna be super stressful. You guys have to dress up, tie.
Oh my god.
Wedding
outfits. I'll tell you later.
Okay.
So tell us, George, do you know what we're going to be covering next?
I do not. Can you please tell me so I can do it?
I will tell you. So we're moving away from movie treatments and amusement venues and all that. We're going back to video games. It's our first video game episode in quite some time. It's going to be Sakura Taisen 5, a.k.a. Sakura Wars So Long My Love, which was really a soft reboot for the franchise. And
another soft reboot.
Its first venture into the West before it disappeared and then briefly came back and then disappeared
again.
So,
yeah.
You excited?
Yeah, I'm excited because it has an interesting history with the localization and the special editions and just the whole concept of the reboot of it and its popularity in Japan. So check us out next time on Sega Talk. Thank you guys for watching and listening. Bye.
See ya.